Welcome. We're glad you're here today. This is another webinar in the series called Unpacking Coaching Webinars, presented by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name's Mary Louise Hemmeter, and I'm going to be your host today. The title of our session today is called Friends Don't Let Friends Slip on Pyramid Model Implementation, Peer Coaching. I'm very excited about this topic, and I know a lot of y'all have been asking for content on peer coaching. All the resources that Adrian talks about, as well as the PowerPoint, are available to download under the related resource section on the webpage for this webinar. So with that, I'm going to get started, or I'm going to let Adrian get started, actually. I'm just thrilled that Adrian Golden has agreed to do this webinar today. She has so much great experience as a teacher and a coach, and so she's going to take the lead. Adrian?
Thanks, Emil. Welcome, everyone. My name is Adrian Golden, and I currently work at Vanderbilt with Emil. I'm a research associate, so I kind of help support a lot of our grants and projects and help run those. And prior to that, I was a teacher. So I taught for 5 years, I think, in inclusive preschool classrooms in the public schools, as well as at a private university-based lab school at Vanderbilt. So I got to work with all kinds of kids, all kinds of related service providers, lots of different co-teachers and students. And during that time, I'll kind of get to it. That's kind of where my ideas around peer coaching came from, was my time teaching at the Susan Gray School at Vanderbilt. So I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then after I taught, I went back to the PhD program at Vanderbilt with ML. So I did that for the last 4 years and have been out for a year. And during that time, I was able to kind of jump onto the coaching side. And so I was able to go out into our local schools and Head Start programs and do a lot of coaching of teachers around implementing the pyramid model. And I did a lot of data collection too. So kind of got both sides of it. So that's where we are today. So I have an agenda. So first we're going to talk about what is peer coaching and kind of just talk a little bit about the terminology. And then I did a study around peer coaching as part of my PhD program. So I'm going to do just a really quick overview of that. And then we're going to talk about using peer coaching kind of outside of research in the real world. And then at the very end, we're going to have an opportunity for y'all to watch a short video and practice as if you were this teacher's peer, how you might take some feedback or take some notes and then provide some feedback. So first of all, I just want to talk about what is peer coaching and then what is reciprocal peer coaching. My study and what I'm going to talk most about is reciprocal peer coaching. So peer coaching is kind of any kind of coaching where peers are coaching one another. So it might be two teachers in a school. Maybe there's two preschool teachers or two kindergarten teachers, and they go into one another's classrooms and provide each other with feedback. And then reciprocal, or so a peer would be they're coming in and giving you feedback. The reciprocal peer coaching is when you're doing that for one another. So it's not just that my peer is coming in and giving me feedback around my teaching. Reciprocal peer coaching, I'm then also giving my peer feedback. So it's kind of that back and forth piece. We're both in it. And so they're similar in that, of course, we have peers who are working together. So it's not an administrator coming in. It's not an external or outside coach. Like I was an external coach coming into a program. So it's similar in that we're peers who are doing it, and then different in that with just peer coaching, it might just be, I'm going to go in and observe ML and give her feedback, and then I might not be getting that feedback. But the reciprocal peer coaching is when we're doing that for each other. So it can be a little confusing, but so kind of the benefits of that reciprocal peer coaching, 3 big things that I think all team members can take part in the coaching. So I think a lot of times, of course, not always, but a lot of times we focus on the lead teacher in a classroom, or we focus on one of the teachers. I know we've done some studies with paraprofessionals, but then the para is getting the coaching and other teachers are not. So this is a way for everyone to be involved in the coaching. Everyone has a voice, take some ownership on what's happening in their classroom. And it's also not just the lead teacher providing feedback, because I think that can be a pitfall that we get into sometimes when we have lead teacher and assistant models, where it's often the lead teacher saying, let's try this, let's do this differently. And so this gives a way for all members of the team to kind of have that equal voice, and everyone can come in and provide that feedback with a different set of eyes. And so that was a big piece when I was teaching. I know my co-teacher was very big on, we can all bring something to the table and everyone's voice is valuable. And so when we did this in our classroom, she really enjoyed that piece because it kind of put us all on the same playing field. And then it can really strengthen the working relationship in your classroom because everyone's working towards a common goal. We're going to talk in a little while about choosing what you work on, but it really gives you kind of a common goal. We're working towards the same thing. We're in this together. And then, of course, it's increasing teacher skill or strategy use across team members. So kids are more consistently contacting those positive teaching strategies. So it's not just one teacher attending a training and trying out these really great strategies. All teachers are trying them out. And so children in the classroom are more consistently having access to those positive teaching strategies. So, like I said, just a quick overview of the study that I did evaluating the effectiveness of reciprocal peer coaching, and we focused on teachers implementing pyramid model practices. So I had 4 teaching teams. You can see the first one had 3 teachers, Darby, Isabel, and Amaya, and then the other 3 teams had 2 teachers each. And so they were all in childcare centers. 2 were preschools that were in a private Catholic school. One was called themselves a childcare center, and one called themselves a daycare center. The daycare and the childcare were very similar in nature, but they gave themselves different names. And so teams had been working together for a variety of time, but not a lot of time. They had only been working together. That last team had only been working together for a week, and then up to 2 years. So they were kind of new teams, but we had a very big range of teaching experience. So one teacher had been teaching for 34 years, and another teacher had only been teaching for 6 months when we started this study. So as you can see, it was a wide range of ages in our teachers. So just a wide range of experience and what they brought to the table in the study. So the first thing that we did is we started with a Tpot observation. So I went in, or one of our master's students went in and did a Tpot observation to kind of see what are they doing in the classroom right now. And then I took that information and I chose several discrete practices that we did not observe teachers using in the classroom. And I went to them with a menu of, say 6 to 8 things and said, hey, here are the things that we didn't observe you doing. Which 4 do you want to work on? And we're going to talk a little bit later about discrete practices versus less discrete skills. So the team worked together to choose the practices they wanted to work on. Then I provided them with training. So say, for example, they chose to work on providing kids with positive descriptive feedback when they were following directions. So I would give a training specifically about what is positive descriptive feedback? What does it mean to give that after children are following directions? What does that look like? What does it not look like? So we'd give a training, and then I introduced the peer coaching model. And then they started doing the peer coaching. And then we would come in every day and videotape to collect data to see if they were using those practices. And then once we felt like they had improved their use of the practices, we moved on to the next one. So here are the practices that across all 4 of our teaching teams, the teachers chose. So they only chose 4, but across all, you can just see the types of practices that they chose. So rule reminders like, hey, remember to use those walking feet, or commenting on appropriate behavior, providing explicit choices. So that was, do you want to do this or that? Do you want to sit next to ML or Ashley? Those really explicit choices, using a variety of emotion words. Providing positive descriptive feedback. One team chose to give that around children who were engaged, and one team chose to focus their feedback on children using friendship, social, or emotional skills. And then one team chose suggesting interactions between peers. So that might be like, hey, why don't you go ask Tommy to come play with you in the block center, or why don't you two build a castle together? So just suggesting those interactions between peers. So you can see that some were more procedural, more universal practices, and then some got into those social emotional practices. So here's the coaching form, and you all will have access to this. It's part of the peer coaching packet that should be accessible to all of you. So what we asked teachers to do was to choose a time during their day. They all chose center time to observe one another for 5 to 10 minutes. And while they were doing that, just to tally their peers' use of the strategy. So if they chose to work on using a variety of emotion words, every time they heard their peer use a different emotion word, they would just tally it. And that's what that top box, that top wide box is for. And then we asked them to record 3 examples of when their peer used the skill. So they might, if they had tallied 5 emotion words, they might write, oh, you told so-and-so that they looked happy because they were smiling. And then another example was, you had a discussion about how, everyone was kind of disappointed that it was raining today, so we couldn't go outside. So they would just write down examples of when they did use the practice. And then at the bottom, where there's kind of 2 different things, we asked that they record 1 to 3 examples of when they felt like their peer might have been able to use the practice, or kind of a missed opportunity, if you will. So maybe they were having a discussion about what they were going to do over the weekend, and you noticed that lots of kids were smiling and they seemed really excited, but the teacher didn't use any emotional words. They might jot down discussion of weekend plans, could have used excited, happy, joyful, whatever. And so that we used as their constructive feedback. And then you'll notice on the right-hand side, it says other strategies. So once we moved on from the first target practice, we realized, oh, we kind of need teachers to still be using the one they just worked on, even though now we're working on something new. So we added those boxes at the bottom where you could just kind of quickly tally, like, hey, you still used a few rule reminders, and kind of a way just to keep that in the forefront of everyone's minds. So we asked them to observe each other for 5 to 10 minutes. I think we asked them to do up to 3 times a week in the activity that they chose. And then all we asked them to do was to give this form to their peer. We did not require that they sit down and have a meeting. We wanted to make it as easy and quick as possible. So we just asked that they give this form to their peer. Anecdotally, one of the teams did report to me that often at the end of the day, when they swapped forms, they would have a quick conversation about it. The other teams did not say that. I know one team had like a folder where they put them. And so then the teacher could go over and kind of flip through their feedback at the end of the day on their own. Here's an example of
Avery,
2 forms
sorry.
filled out.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
did they take turns? Like, did they one observe each other one day and then the other observe the other the next day, or did they each do it like multiple days?
Yeah. They each did multiple days. So unless there was something up with their schedule, most of them would observe each other on the same day. So they might take like, hey, I'm going to take the first 5 minutes of center time and observe you. And then, you could take, in about a half hour, we might switch and you could observe me. So they did do the same day.
Okay. And it was easy enough that they could still be engaging with kids to some extent, or they had to pull back from engaging with kids?
Yeah, I mean, they for sure could still be engaging. I think for most of the teachers, they did kind of pause and take a step back, but they were still able to very actively monitor. And if any children came up to them or they saw that children needed support, they either could pause or still kind of keep an eye on their peer and help the children. I know they didn't like stay engaged in a big, dramatic play scenario while they were trying to observe their peer, but they were still very much able to actively supervise. And of course, we told them this is not more important than the safety of the kids in your class. So of course, pause if, something is needed of you. But we didn't get any feedback around it being difficult or feeling like, they couldn't be a part of their classroom or that kids were losing out or anything like that. So it seemed like a kind of seamless thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this is just an example of 2 forms that were filled out. For research, we did ask them to use identifying numbers instead of names. One team did not do that, but they just wrote down what the practice was to kind of remind themselves. And then this was more for research purposes to know exactly how long they observed. But you can see how they tallied, wrote down examples. and then wrote down kind of missed opportunities. So this one in the purple says, could have commented on how well the two girls at table were sharing and including each other with the dolls. So they were working on commenting on appropriate behavior. So that was an example of when their teammate could have. This one was also working on commenting on appropriate behavior. That works out well. And so example 2 says, child walked to his center and teacher said, thank you for using your walking feet. So that was an example of when she did use the practice. And this is just a quick graph from one of the teaching teams. So to orient you, here on the left, it's the number of times they used each practice, and this is 3 different practices. So we had suggesting interactions between peers, commenting on appropriate behavior, and using a variety of emotion words. So we started with emotion words and then added on commenting and then added on suggesting interactions. So to the left of this dark line is their baseline, or what they were doing before they did any coaching and before I did any training. So you can see they use the practices some, but pretty minimal. I think the highest appears 2. This might go to 3. So in the whole observation, 3 times they commented on appropriate behavior, but often they did none. So then we introduced the training and the coaching at this solid line. And then you can see that they did increase their use of target practices once we introduced the coaching in each of the practices. And the shading is each teacher. So we collected data on both teachers together. We looked at it as a team using versus what did teacher A do and what did teacher B do separately. So the darker shading is one teacher and the lighter shading is another teacher. And we looked at their combined use. And so we didn't focus so much on, are they each using the exact same number? We focused on, we wanted both to be using the practice, but we looked more at overall as a team. Have they increased their use? And other teams were very similar in their practice use. I just have the one graph. And something really cool that we did, so like I mentioned before, we did the Tpot in each classroom before. So of course that was to get kind of a baseline measure and to be able to choose practices for them to work on. And then we also did one after we worked on all of their target practices to kind of see if they had made any improvements. And so you can see the numbers on the top are their pre-Tpot. So they were all between 43 and 50% of practices in place on the Tpot. And then after the intervention, you can see that minus team 300, which I'll talk about in a second, they bumped up to now 58 to 69%. So we saw a really big increase. And what we noticed is that they were now implementing all of the practices that we had talked about and trained on and did coaching around, but then they also kind of generalized that to similar practices. So for example, if they had been doing positive descriptive feedback around engagement, they might also now be doing positive descriptive feedback around following directions or using friendship skills, because now they were used to giving positive descriptive feedback. So they were giving it a lot more. And if they're working on using a variety of emotion words, well, you can imagine they might start discussing those emotion words. They might validate children's emotions. So kind of things that naturally, even though we didn't train them specifically on that, just because they were using one practice sort of naturally led them to using other practices as well. So that was really cool to see. And teaching team 300, they actually chose to drop out of the study before they completed coaching. I think we just started working on the first practice and they had a lot of other competing demands going on. And so they felt like they were no longer a good fit to continue with the study. But we still did the post Tpot and we saw a little change that could have just been variation in days, probably not a result of our coaching. But that's why theirs didn't change quite as much.
Hey, Adrian, one of the participants wanted to know, when you were doing these Tpots pre and post, which teacher did you focus on? So someone asking this question knows a lot about the Tpot. So
yes, you sure do. And so as you know, when we do the Tpot, we usually only watch the lead teacher. We actually did our best to watch both. And so we gave credit if we saw any teacher in the classroom using the practice, or if it was something that we needed to see more than once. If we saw the lead teacher use the practice once and then the co-teacher or assistant use it later, we would give credit. So it probably wasn't perfect because it is hard to watch all of the teachers going on, whatever's going on in the classroom. But we did give credit for kind of cumulatively what all of the teachers were doing. And we actually had, I think in one of the classrooms, in 400, we had both teachers came to the interview and kind of did the interview together. In this classroom, the first classroom, it was one of the assistants that did the interview. And then in this classroom, it was the lead teacher, and then the lead teacher in the third classroom too. So it was kind of a whole team effort to do that.
And Adrian, someone was asking, and I messed up and didn't type the response right, but they were asking about, was this the overall Tpot or just specific to the skills? And I think it's important for people to know this was their overall Tpot score.
This was their overall Tpot score. Yep. So just like we would do a Tpot in any other study or for any other purpose. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to jump in now to how you might use peer coaching in early childhood classrooms. So the first thing is, there might be more, but I've pulled out 2 peer coaching options. So coaching around discrete practices, which are what I did my study around, were those really discrete, you can easily tally, when it happens, when a teacher uses an emotion word, when they give a rule reminder, those discrete practices versus coaching around a whole routine or an activity where it might be a little more vague. So those of you who are familiar with the Tpot, thinking about things like the transitions item, there's like 8 indicators under transitions. And so you might coach around that whole piece, because just pulling out, giving transition warnings might not be feasible, right? You've got to watch across the whole day for them to do that. So you might kind of look at the whole routine of transitions and all of the indicators under that item. So I think those are 2 different ways you could approach it, those discrete skills or the whole routines. We're going to focus more on the discrete skills, but at the end, I am going to show you examples of how we did routines in my classroom. So 5 questions to ask when you're looking at peer coaching on discrete skills. The first being, what skills or strategies do you as the teaching team want to target? So this, remember, teachers who are working together in the classroom, and they could sit down and do this themselves. They don't necessarily need an external coach or admin with them to do that. So what skills or strategies will you target? When are team members going to observe one another? How are you going to give peer feedback? How will you take data or record information during the observation? And then how are you going to monitor your overall progress and decide when you want to move on and focus on a new skill? Not forgetting the original skill, but adding on a new skill. So now I'm going to walk through the peer coaching guide, I guess, that I created. And so this is what you have access to, is this guide. So first, thinking about what skills and strategies you want to target. I think a great way to do that, of course, if you've had a Tpot done in your classroom, I would ask for that information if you can get it. And that could be a great way to figure out where you want to start. But another thing you can do is just look at an inventory of practices. So I put this one together, kind of pulling discrete skills from the Tpot. So they're pyramid model specific, but if you're using other things in your classroom, you can use that too. If you have a curriculum-based inventory of practices, kind of anything. So just kind of going through the practices and saying, okay, reviewing the posted schedule with children throughout the day. Do we always do that? Do we sometimes do that? Or do we never do that? And so self-assessing. And I would encourage you to do that together as a team, do that self-assessment. And you might find that maybe you do something always, and your peer does something never, maybe you both do it sometimes. And so then just kind of self-assess where you are as a team on these things. And then from that, circling 2 to 3 things you might want to work on with peer coaching. So then you kind of know, and then you pick, like, we want to start here, but we have these couple other things that we want to then move on to.
So Adrian, there's a couple of questions I'm going to combine into one right now. So there's still, I think, maybe just to reiterate, people are asking about this, is that both members of the teaching team are giving each other feedback. So it's not just the lead teacher. But
Correct.
the other question is, so do they work on the same skill, or might they be working on different skills, or what would you do if they wanted to work on different skills? There's just a few questions that are related to that topic.
Yeah, sure. I think you easily do it either way. When I did my study, we had them work on the same skill. I think that I don't want to say easier because it might not be in your classroom, but I think that's the first go-to is just let's choose one that we work on together. But I think that if a teacher feels strongly about like, I really need to work on, or I see that maybe when you do this assessment, you see, gosh, I never give whole class warnings before a position, and you always do. And I see that, that's a really helpful strategy. I should really try to work on that. Is that something I can focus on, even if, you already do that? So you don't need to focus on it. Can I focus on that? So I think that that's totally fine, as long as I think it should be a team decision. Like, is it okay? Do you feel good as a team if we're each working on something different? But I think that that's totally fine. I think it might be easier to keep it all on track and really support each other if you're working on the same thing and really encourage one another. But I do think it's possible if someone feels strongly that I should really work on this skill, that you could work on that separately. Does that get at your question, Emil?
Yeah. And as you were talking, when I asked the question, I was like, I'm not sure if we would agree on the answer to this necessarily, but I was thinking while you were talking that, and this is kind of connected to the questions about who's coaching who, is that we want this to be a collaborative process. I mean, that's what's really important, right? And so if they kind of mutually agree, you're really good at doing X, and I'm not, I want to work on that. And how about you work, that there could be some real benefits to that. So
yeah, I for sure like that you brought up the collaboration piece. I think that's key, is that it is a collaborative process. It's not me saying you need to work on this, and you need ownership of it too. I think there's something to be said for let's compromise and work on the same thing, but also, maybe some people feel certain, like I need to have ownership over this to kind of get my feet wet in this process. And so let me choose a skill that I really find important to work on. So I think it could be done either way. I have experience with teachers doing the same practice, so I know that worked well for them, but I think it could be done different ways. So after you choose the skill that you want to target, the next thing is deciding when team members are going to observe one another and when you will give your peer feedback. So on this form, we have a little planning section. So the first one is, when will you observe each other? And so we just listed out several common times of day in early childhood classrooms: arrival, meals, large group, small group, centers, playground, or other. There could be other times of day that are specific to your classroom. So just working together through this form and choosing, when do we want to observe one another, and thinking about when during the day can one of us step back. So in my classroom, I know that small group was at the beginning of the year was not a time when one of us could step back, or, everything would fall apart. So that would not have been a time that we chose in the beginning of the year. But meal times were a time when we just had really good routines going. And so that could have been an easy time for one of us to sit a little bit back and still kind of be able to monitor and give feedback. So figuring out when, and that's something that could change, right? Like I said, in the beginning of the year, small groups was not a good time. Towards the end, it probably would have been okay to focus on. So you could definitely change that, but deciding when you're going to observe one another, and then thinking about how often. Do you want to do it one time per week, twice a week, 2, 3, 4, 5? I think 5 is probably pretty ambitious to go with, but it's an option. If this is brand new to you, you might choose 1 to 2 times a week and see how that goes. And then if you feel good about it, do it more often, or maybe you're starting out with 2 or 3 and then feel like that's too much, or you're in a good rhythm and you can just do it once a week. So whatever's going to work. And then think about how to provide feedback. So written feedback could be something like the data form that I showed, or the coaching form that I showed before, which I'll show again on the next slide. Could be verbal. We're giving each other verbal feedback, like, hey, I saw, during large group, you did X, Y, and Z. This was really great. Here's something you might try. In the moment, some teachers, this is where you're going to really need to look at everyone's preferences. Some people love in the moment. If you just call it like, hey, now's a really good time to use, or suggest that those two play together. And some people really do not like that kind of feedback. They get kind of thrown off their game when they've got lots of things coming at them. So that's something that if you or your team member do not like that, don't choose that. And then another option is a sit down meeting. And so that, of course, is going to depend on your schedule. I know that for the most part, when I was teaching, we had one afternoon a week where we had planning time as a team. And so we would try and have some time where we could give feedback and kind of reflect on our week and how things were going. So that could be a great time if you have that available to you. And if you choose a sit down meeting, just jotting down when as a way to keep yourselves accountable. I think it's totally fine if people have different preferences. I think there should be some similar system in how we're going to kind of take some notes and organize ourselves. But if one team member really prefers that in the moment and another is like, hey, can you just write it down and I'll look at it later? I think it's fine to do both as long as that works for all of you in the classroom. And then thinking about the length of the observation. So in the study that I did, we asked teachers to observe for 5 to 10 minutes. We felt like that was a good snapshot of what was happening and it was manageable for them. I think you could probably, 15 is probably similarly manageable. But you might choose length of the activity, and that could really depend on what the strategy is that you're working on. If it's something you might do often, then 5 to 15 minutes might be okay. Or if it's a small group and your small group is only 8 to 10 minutes long, you might just decide to do the length of the activity. So it kind of depends on what skills you're working on, how your schedule is set up, what activity you've chosen to observe. And of course, you can, choose, like, for example, one of on the inventory of practices, one was giving transition warnings. So that's likely to only happen once per transition. So it might be that you're going to choose length of observation as other, and it's going to be just, a few minutes prior to every transition, I'm going to observe that. So it's not really a length of time thing. And then we have down here this observation schedule. And so you can see I put 5 boxes on top and 5 on the bottom. So you can think of that as like 2 school weeks. And so when an observation occurs, just date and initial the calendar to keep track is kind of how I envision this being used. So again, that's personal preference. I am a very visual person. I like being able to write things down. I like being able to cross off that they are done. And so for me, this would be super helpful to plan that out. Who's going to observe when, and then I could initial or check it off that it was done. So that might be something that helps keep you all on track. If that's not how you work, or if you have a different system for how you keep track of those things in your classroom, that's totally fine. This is just a tool that you could use in any way that works for you. And then a final suggestion that I had that kind of corresponds to our last question that we're going to hit on in a second, but how will you kind of know that you've made overall progress? Thinking about if you can schedule a member of your administrative team to do check-in observations, preferably if they could do one kind of before you start coaching, and then maybe 3 to 6 weeks later, ask them to come in again and let them know, hey, we've been working on, using and discussing emotions in our classroom. Could you pop in and do a quick observation and let us know if you've seen progress or how it's going? And so this gives you a place where you can record that information. Like Dr. Hemmeter is going to come in on Tuesday at 9:30 and observe center time. Just, to keep that.
Okay, so sorry, I have a couple of questions for you that are related to what you've just been talking about. So one is, are there certain quality, well, no, I'm going to save that one for later, actually. Okay. I'm going to ask you, so you were just talking about maybe having the administrator or somebody come in. What kind of, did you feel like the administrators gave these teachers time to do this, or the teachers just made time in their day? And just kind of wondering how important that administrative leadership is to something like this.
Yeah, I mean, in my study, all the administrators knew about what was happening. And so I met with them first to kind of get their consent, and they connected me with the teachers, so they knew what was happening. But the way we set it up was that teachers wouldn't need any extra time outside of the training. So like in my study, it was a little bit different. You might not have these little short trainings that I did. So we did work with administrators to allow teachers to have time during the school day for I think we did 3 total trainings across, several months. So it was really short and quick. So we did work with administrators to either do something on a lunch break or to get coverage in a classroom for that. But the actual coaching piece, teachers just found time. And like I said, they all chose to just hand each other, or we didn't give them a choice. We just told them to hand the paper to one another. And so there wasn't a lot of time needed. I think if you want to do this and really establish it and you feel like you want time, I think it'd be great if you could go to your administrator and kind of say, hey, this is something I've learned about. I really want to give it a try. Here's what it would entail. We know classrooms are very busy and there might not be a lot of opportunity for designated time is not the word I'm thinking of, but dedicated time. Dedicated time for that. But if you can talk to your administrator and say, like, I know, for example, in my school, like I said, most weeks we had one afternoon. And so for us, it might be going to the administrator and say, hey, we're really focusing on this kind of coaching. Can we do our best to really protect that 1 day a week time so that we can work on this initiative? And I think if you can't get that time, I think you might revert back to some in the moment feedback or this written feedback where you don't have to have a lot of connection. If your administrators are not available to come in, I don't think it's required by any means. I think it's a nice little addition. You might also brainstorm who else in your school might be able to serve that kind of fresh eyes perspective. Maybe it's another teacher in another classroom who could use a planning time to come over. Maybe you have instructional coaches who might be able to come over, or an assistant principal. So you can think beyond just my principal or my director needs to come in. So one, they don't have to. It's just a little added bonus and kind of can keep everyone on the same page and give you a fresh perspective, but it's not required. And then you can also think beyond just my director has to come in and observe. So then think about how you will take data and record information during the observation. So this is the same form that I showed before. So this is in the packet that you have access to. So this is one way that you might take data, but you can do it any kind of way that makes sense for you. Some people like running records where you just take notes on a piece of paper and kind of write down things as they happen. You might like to tally, you might not like to tally, you might just like to write down the examples and non-examples. So just think about, as a team, one, the person receiving the feedback. So if I'm observing ML, how does ML want to receive feedback? Like what's going to be helpful? If I just tally, that might not be helpful. It might be easy and quick for me as the observer, but she might get that paper and say, great, I did something 5 times. I don't quite know what that means. So thinking about the teacher who's receiving the feedback, what's helpful for them to know. And then thinking about you as the observer, you want to be helpful to your peer, but you also need to be able to manage taking notes. So I'll give a Tpot example. I cannot take running record notes when I do a Tpot. So if my peer said, I would like you to do running notes of, when you observe, I would have to say, I want to support you in all ways possible, but I'm not a very good running note taker. Let's think of how I can give you as much information as possible, but in a way that I can manage to watch you and take notes. So I think that that's important to just work on, but really there's no right or wrong way to take data. I think the important part is having something that can serve as your supportive feedback. So here's what you did really well related to the practice we're working on, and then something that can serve as the constructive feedback. Here's how you could improve the practice. Either you could use it more often in this way, you could use it in a different way, use it with different children in the classroom. So some suggestions for how they might increase or improve their use of the practice. So as long as you have that supportive piece and that constructive piece, I think taking notes and data in any way that's going to work for your team is good. And then speaking of data, this might be my favorite part, is how you're going to monitor your overall progress and decide when to focus on a new practice. So one way to tie this in is, like I mentioned, having kind of those fresh eyes come in. And if they also are seeing progress, that might help you to say like, oh yeah, it's not just us thinking we use more motion words, we actually are. But you could also make a graph, which I just love. So I included these two graphs in your packet. So what you would do down here on the bottom is just write the date. So today's I don't even know what today is, 6/15. So you can write 6/15 and maybe we did it 2 times. I can put a little dot. And then tomorrow I observe and we did it 3 times and then it kind of graphs itself. You could do this like a bar graph if that's easier, if you're not as familiar with line graphs. So here on this first day, I would write the date underneath again, 6/15. Maybe we use it 3 times. I color in the first 3. And so that's an easy way to know. So you can use this however, so you would write, how many times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the dates down the bottom. You could have one for each teacher. If you would like to keep it separate, you could do it like we did it. Maybe you get a different color crayon to color in your bar graph. However you want to keep track. I really like graphs. It's a super easy visual to have to where you can really see your progress over time. And maybe, one day it really dipped down and man, what happened that day? What barriers were there to us using or not using the practice? So yeah, so I love a good graph. So you can use it or not. Okay, so the next thing that we have is an opportunity for y'all to practice. I think we are perfect on time. We have this opportunity to watch a short video, and then I'm just going to touch really quickly on how you might use checklists around routines and activities, and then that will wrap us up. So we are going to watch this video. So you're going to have to do a little pretend play. So you're going to have to pretend that you are a teacher in this classroom and you are stepping back for a few minutes to observe your peer. And it'll be obvious. The teacher that we're watching, she has her hair up in a ponytail with a leopard print. She has several leopard print things on. So she has chosen to work on encouraging interactions between peers. So that could be having peers talk to one another, play with one another, solve problems together, whatever it is. So as you're watching, I want you to think, okay, I'm this teacher's co-teacher, and I'm observing her around encouraging interactions between peers. I need to take some notes about when she uses the practice, so when she encourages those interactions, and make notes of times when she might encourage peers. So take some notes on that and be thinking about how you might give feedback to your peer. Okay.
Please give it back. Julia, you have a giraffe, so what can you do? But can you take it away from her? No, we can't do that. You can ask nicely. Remember, right here? Remember? Ask nicely. You can say, can I please have a turn? There's lots of different things, right? Or tell the teacher, right? Did it work? Are you happy? In a few minutes, what do you think you might do? You might give it back. I like it. All right. We are going to do subtraction with Play-Doh. All right, I have it. I have your Play-Doh. But first I want to make sure you understand what subtraction is. Remember when we were talking about adding, we put them together and count them off.
Subtraction means take them away.
Did you hear what she said? Subtraction means you take it away.
You take some away.
What do you do when you subtract, Elijah?
I throw the rock away.
You take it away, that's right. So when we use Play-Doh to take it away, we're going to smash it.
Like,
yeah, and that means we're going to take it away. Softer, a little softer. I like that, and I like this. And what are you ladies doing? Are you making jewelry?
yeah.
Yes, because it starts with J. That's right.
It's so little.
It is so little. What is that? It's a ring, right? You put it on your finger. And this is a bracelet.
I'm going to invite you in my birthday.
You're going to invite me to your birthday? Girl, I love birthdays. Did you find something yet? Hey, will you write my people on there? You're still thinking. hang on. Let me put my phone down. It's stuck in my pocket. All right. Let's walk over. I think it looks great. Hey, y'all want to play? Can they play with us? Yeah, okay. Let's build it. Yeah, sharing is caring. That is super sweet.
Something else. You get what you get and you don't perfect.
That's a hard one because sometimes they give you something you don't really like.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, hang on. It goes this way. There. Now remember, it goes back this way. Yes. All right. Come around.
Guys, I haven't had my turn.
Did you knock somebody's thing over? Why?
I accident.
It was an accident. Did you say sorry?
No, I forgot.
Yeah, please go say sorry because I think he thinks you did it on purpose.
But underneath me.
All right. Sometimes I use this to make it like
What
really.
about this one?
I use
This
this.
one.
Sometimes I'll put this on the side of it and it makes it like really straight. All right, so let's decide how to make this fair. Who is going to go first?
I want to go first.
All right, how about since Eben was here first? Oh, class. It got right back up loud again. So I don't know what we're going to do, but if we can't get quieter, we can't keep playing.
Miss Clara, I'm going to be on the carpet.
All right, so it's going to go, can you slide this way just a little bit?
Yeah.
All right, so it's going to go Eben, Aria, and okay. Can we use two hands?
No.
No, that's cheating. Right. You only get to use one hand. Now when you pull it from the bottom and you put it on the... All right, we're good to go. Here we go. Good luck, Eben.
Okay, for time's sake, I'm going to stop us there. So I don't know, ML, if they can maybe throw some ideas into the chat. And then if you could, maybe pull out just 2 or 3 to read off. So thinking about when you were watching that video, when did you see the teacher encouraging interactions between peers? So that could be conversations, play, working together, any of those, or some examples of where you saw opportunities for the teacher to have used the practice, and that she didn't. And so think about how you might, if this was your co-teacher, how you might provide her with some of that supportive or constructive feedback.
Yes, so one person already said that she pointed out when one of the peers said something about what subtraction meant, that the teacher said, "Did you hear what she said?" So calling the children's attention to what the child had said.
Yeah.
Open-ended questions. At the beginning, the teacher used the chart to help the child choose a positive interaction. I missed that.
Yeah. So they had the solution suitcase up, and she had kind of walked in on a little scuffle between the 2 kids and helped them pick a solution where they could take turns. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it's going way too fast. There's lots of good examples.
Oh, good. So y'all are already experts at how you could.
Yeah. But I'll also, I'm trying to read them and talk at the same time, say that people also had some specific suggestions, and one person wrote an opportunity, which I love, right? It's an opportunity. When the child talked about her birthday, she couldn't have encouraged the other kids to talk about their favorite things about their birthdays or something like that. So anyway, so there's tons of things appearing in the chat. But I think one of the things that's important about the things I'm reading is the specificity. And so some of the ones I just read that were like, when the child did this, you could have done this or whatever. I think that what we know is that the more descriptive the feedback is for adults, the better, just like the more descriptive the feedback is for children.
Yes. Yeah. So I love that. Yeah, you all did. I just pulled up the chat too, because I just wanted to see some of them. Yeah. So y'all did a great job picking out different supportive and constructive feedback. And there's value in both. And we want to make sure that we're giving our peers both in a session. And sometimes it can be tricky. I think on the surface, this video, it is a fabulous video, and we are so appreciative of teachers who let us come in and videotape, because that is such a scary thing to let people come in and do that. But I think on the surface, like, all the children are engaged with other kids, and this teacher does such a great job of kind of going around and engaging with children that you kind of look and you're like, oh, there's just 1,000 opportunities for kids to interact, and she's doing such a great job. But when you really focus in, there are little opportunities, like those two girls talking about the birthday. They are at the same table, they are doing the same activity, but are they talking to one another? I don't think so. So that is a great opportunity. So digging deeper than just on the surface, where in this classroom, kids were always together at centers and looked like they were playing. And so there's still always a way to kind of dig into that. Okay, I want to be mindful of the time. So we are going to jump into looking at peer coaching with checklists. So I think this is a good option if you want to focus on a routine or an activity, like I mentioned, like all of transitions, instead of picking a really discrete practice. So thinking about, you can use that when you want to target the whole routine. So obviously you need to choose what routine or activity that is. You could choose transitions. We did meal times, we did small groups, we did center time. And so thinking about what that looks like, and then thinking about what strategies do you want to focus on. So asking yourself questions like, what do you need to do to set up a successful activity? So small group, you want to have your materials available to you. You want to be prepared ahead of time. How are you going to promote engagement within the activity? What might those strategies look like? How will you embed learning opportunities? How will you respond to challenging behavior? Those could be your indicators, if you will, on the checklist. You could also very easily pull, an item from the Tpot, like transitions, or maybe during center time, you want to work on supportive conversations. You could pull indicators right from something like the Tpot or another tool that you use. Of course, you need to observe during that target activity. So if you choose transitions, you don't want to observe meal times, you want to observe transitions. And then just the same way, providing feedback to your peer. So here are here we go. 2 examples of checklists that I actually used in my classroom. It was when I worked in the lab school. So I had myself, a co-teacher, we had a student worker, we had student teachers in and out. Sometimes we had like more adults and kids, but we use this kind of everyone to get feedback. And so you can see here on the left, this was a mealtime checklist. So we had down the side 10 things that we wanted to work on. So having all the food prepared and in reach of the teacher, sitting at the child's level to facilitate eye contact, offering choices to children was something we wanted to work on. We were working a lot on kids' target language level and increasing, so that's why that's in there. We had a how to respond to challenging behavior indicator. So then you can see we just checked, did the teacher do this? Check mark yes, minus no, NA, like if there was no challenging behavior. And then there was space for comments. So that's where you might write those missed opportunity examples or a really specific example that you wanted to give the supportive feedback around. This one in the middle here was a free play checklist. So free play center time, you might call it something different. So getting the activity ready ahead of time, showing enthusiasm and interest. You can be in a center and not be interested at all. So that could be something you work on. So just a bunch of things, again, the same. This one, I know it's hard to read, but this one was a more general checklist, or actually this is our small group checklist. I apologize. And so it was, did the teacher do X, Y, and Z skills that we have pulled out. And this just gave us opportunities to observe more than once. So 3 observation days. And on this one, we did a system where it was 0, 1, or 2. So 0 was the teacher did not do this at all. So have all the materials prepared. Teacher had no small group materials prepared, to be a 0. And then it was like 25 to 75% of the time they did, or of opportunities. And then they got a 1, and 2 was 75% or more. That's a little complicated, but I just want to mention it in case you can read that box and want to know what that was. But I think checking off that, you did it or tallying is totally fine. But here you could just record several times. So my last slide, I know we're right at time, is just an example. This was, I had observed one of our student teachers. And so here we had just multiple days, small group. She did story, snack. We embedded a small group during snack time. And so you can just see, it took the data. I took notes about what exactly she was doing. this was our 0, 1, 2 system. But as I mentioned earlier, I love a good graph. So you can see I like that system. We could graph it and see that she ended up getting 100% twos. And so that meant she was still an example. So yeah, sorry to have rushed through that last part, but we've
No,
made it through.
that's okay. I want to just respond to a couple of questions real quick. And then Adrian, if you have anything to add, feel free to. So
Yeah.
there were a bunch of questions about, were these teachers trained in pyramid model? And most of them were not, and certainly weren't in any formal way. But I think one way to really think about doing this well would be if you do Tpot training, or sorry, if you do pyramid model training for staff, to have teaching teams work together at the training to say, this is the practice we want to work on in peer coaching. So you could see how you could go from this to peer coaching, or from training to peer coaching. But the one thing I want you to talk about just real quick, like 1 minute, is, are there any teachers that this isn't good for, or is it just a matter of how you work to build the context for teachers to be able to do this?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I for sure don't want to say that there's any person or teaching team that this is not good for. I think anyone could get there, but I think there are things to keep in mind before choosing this as your go-to coaching model. So I think to start off, teams should have a positive working relationship. I think for one of the teams that I worked with, the one who dropped out of the study, I would say, had a neutral working relationship. So I think that kind of got in the way a little bit. So that positive working relationship, I think you need teachers who are open, who already do, or are open to sharing responsibilities in the classroom, because it's going to be hard to do, how are you doing at center time if this teacher is always taking children to the bathroom? So being open to sharing those responsibilities, we're all working together. You need to be open to receiving feedback. If you're someone who shuts down when you get that constructive feedback, I think that's something you need to work on before you have your co-teacher doing that, because that could be damaging to the relationship. And then I think for peer coaching, teams need some kind of baseline of positive practice implementation. I think if both teachers are coming from a place where they don't have a lot of positive practice implementation, I think they need more support than peer coaching can offer to start. And then I think they could get to a point where they could work on. So I think they have to have a pretty decent baseline of having some strategies in place, being positive teachers, that kind of thing. So I think any team could work up to that point, but those are the things that I think I would suggest.
I love those.
Coaching.
I mean, I think that for a lot of y'all who are on this call, you've been to our webinars where we've talked about group coaching and individual coaching and peer coaching. And I think what we're trying to do is really talk about what are effective ways to deliver practice-based coaching and what are efficient ways. And I think this offers a more efficient way, but it might not be, I think Adrian, what you just ended with, it might not be intensive enough, right? Mm-hmm. For teachers who are just getting started on pyramid model practices. So anyway, we could talk about this all day, but thank y'all so much. Adrian, thank you so much. People loved it. You should read the chat.
Thanks for having me.
I love this content. And Victor, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so very much to our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do. Please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for our upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.